love making quilts for people, and I've made several. I like to kind of make them personal if they like horses, or I've made my son an eagle quilt for his Eagle Scout, and my husband has not really received a quilt from me, so I'm going to surprise him with all of his favorite sports teams. I've got the Lakers and the Raiders. He went to Berkeley, so I found this fleece, and it's going to be pretty simple. That I'm going to do 12.5-inch squares, fussy cut them, and sew them together. So I've worked on the top row, which isn't the 12-inch squares, but this will be the top row because I really liked this to be the center. So he also went to UC Irvine to get his master's. There wasn't any fleece available, so what I've chosen to do is just, I'm going to buttonhole stitch it onto this other piece of fleece, and that will be great. So what I'm working on today is finishing the stitching of the 6-inch strips that I've cut of this fleece, and it's just fun fabric. You know, it's all sports related, basketball, football, and then I've weaved them into a pattern of just a simple, you know, in and out basket weave, and then I've stitched it on. That's what I'm working on today, is stitching it on the vertical, and then hopefully maybe tomorrow I can work on finishing stitching it in the horizontal, and then my top's all done and I can put it together. But what I did want to point out is what I've done here is I've put a card table in front of my sewing table to kind of give me some extra room, because you can sometimes have to be creative when we sew. So I'm rolling this up so that I can be able to feed it through my machine, and then I'm more than halfway, so I've flipped it around and I will be working on this side here. It's a little easier to deal with. I've got to say, this wasn't the easiest project I've done. I think it's creative, and I think for guys it's hard to come up with quilts, so I think it's fun, and I think he'll really like it. I'm working with the monofill clear thread, and I've put my machine on a stretch setting, and just because of the size, it's been a little awkward to work with. I've had to rent large tables to do the weave pattern, and I'm on a deadline. So it's important just to keep your fleece flat, and then just take this and pinch it, and let the machine feed it through. One tip that I have for when you're working with your clear mono poly thread is when you're threading it, it's often hard to see to actually thread it. So make sure that you cut your thread before you try to thread it. Put the foot down, gives you a little bit more room, and I often just turn off the light, because sometimes if you're, depending on where your machine is, you can actually kind of see light through the hole, and it's just sometimes easier to thread. So I got it. Make sure you thread from front to back. And when you lift up your foot, you know, you're not going to have as much play. So I'm going to bring my bobbin thread up. And I can turn my light back on. Make sure you kind of hold it in place when you get going also. That helps. So my back to my quilt is done. So I'm working on the binding today, and I was able to get the front and the back pinned last night, and it looks like I'm going to be able to make my deadline for my birthday present. So it ended up 57 inches wide and about 84 inches long. I did 25 of my fussy cut blocks, but I had a couple of different headers too. He's a big fan of the San Francisco Giants, so I put a strip in there, and then another topper, kind of balanced it out with another Giants down here. So this is just a really fun project that you can do whatever you want. So just have fun with it. And my other suggestion is with rotary cutter blades, because I always have these plastic containers I put my old blades in so that they don't, you know, I don't get cut. But then it's like, was that new? Was that old? Try to mark them. But my newest thing is just keep the package, put it in, it looks new, you know it's new. So the clear thread was kind of giving me problems this morning. So on the binding, since it's all one color, I just switched over to a regular thread, and it is working pretty well. I just wanted to show you how I'm doing the corners. So I'm taking like a 3/4 of an inch seam allowance, a couple more. I'm going to turn it 90 degrees. Go ahead and sew off at the point, bring it around, do not clip your threads at this point. Turn your quilt around. Place it 90 degrees, right, and then put your binding right back on top. Take your threads, kind of helps put them in position, and I'm going to pull them in just a second, get everything squared up, make sure no pins are in the way, continue on. So now I need to join my two pieces of binding together, and at this point I'm going to take it out of my sewing machine. It's okay to cut the thread, because you are going to sew these together. But first you have to cut them. So you have to know where to cut it. So we've already established what my seam allowance is going to be. So I have to make the seam that right there. So now you can either mark it with a pin, or sometimes just depends on the fabric. But so if I cut it here and sew it, then it'll be just the right length. I'm going to sew these together with a straight stitch. Put it back in the machine. So as I'm sewing my flannel binding on, I just want to make sure that I'm tucking it under and then rotating it all the way around, and I need to make sure that it's over my initial seam and that it's lined up with my pressure foot on this side. I wanted to show you how I'm doing the corners. So I've taken my seam down to where I'm going to turn my fabric right over. It's been a little challenging to get it in under my foot. Kind of had a little bit of help pushing it through. Make sure you drop your pressure foot. And I've used this side of my foot as a guide. So I'm going to try to get it over just a little bit more. You being a good girl? Thank you for being a good girl. Yeah, you're a good girl. Well, my quilt for my husband's birthday is done. He's gonna love it. He just said to me today that there wasn't any quilt that would be for a guy. I don't think so. And in the back, fun, fun, fun. It's done.
With the Raiders? And the Giants and Cow? What? What? How does it have all of those, everything on there? You made that, honey? Wow, you're something. You're something. You're so-and-so. You know, this is for laying on the couch watching sports. I think he likes it.